It's Chris from Slide Rule Racing again. Today's video is on how to rebuild a Mercruiser 2-barrel carburetor. This carburetor is out of my 2004 Bayliner. It has the 4.3 liter Mercruiser engine, and I'm using the 3320-804-844 carburetor rebuild kit. The first step is to remove the choke housing. So I used my impact driver to help make sure I didn't strip any of the screws. Fast forward through some of the process. My goal here is to get the carburetor disassembled enough so that I can clean the primary housings. Next step is to remove the fuel filter inlet. Inspecting the fuel filter and making sure that there's no major debris in there. Then you can move along to starting to take apart the two halves of the carburetor body, removing the 5 screws in the top, 5 or 6 screws in the top of the body. After you get all those out, you'll have to use a little persuasion to disassemble the top of the carburetor from the gasketing. Prior to removing the cover, you do need to make sure that you remove the clips that are holding those rods in the linkages. Here I am removing the accelerator pump spring and the jet screws. I use an impact driver here to help make sure that I don't strip it. This is probably the trickiest part of the disassembly, and this is the tamper-proof cap on the mixture screw, the idle mixture screw. I kind of went at this with a bunch of different tools. Fortunately, the rebuild kit does give you a new mixture screw, so as you'll see, I ended up bending mine slightly, but that was not a problem as I had the replacement. Oops. This is the float disassembly. I replaced all of the float components except for the spring in the float seat. As it turned out, the spring that came in my rebuild kit was quite a bit weaker than the original spring, and I couldn't get the float level to adjust where it was supposed to be. This is the accelerator pump linkage removal. At this point I chose to refrain from further disassembly. I didn't see the need to continue to take more parts off, so I moved straight on to the soaking and cleaning of the main body. The first part in my cleaning step on this carburetor was to try to soak the body in the carburetor cleaner in its entirety, and after a little fiddling I did manage to get the whole carburetor in the can. After that, soaked for the better part of a half an hour to an hour, I took it out and then cleaned it in my ultrasonic cleaner with Simple Green. The first rebuilding step is to reinstall the jets and the power valve if you remove those, as I did. And then you want to reassemble the accelerator pump spring into the lower housing. And then I'm assembling the idle mixture screw. It has a spring and a washer. And you should make your initial adjustments based on the sheet that comes with the rebuild kit, as far as how many turns out from bottom the mixture screw should be. And here I am reassembling the accelerator pump onto its linkage before assembling it into the upper housing. Finally, we'll reassemble the new float parts. That's the valve seat. Thread that in with its gasket. And then put the you can at this time insert your needle seat and spring, and then install the gasket between the two halves of the carburetor body. Finish assembling the float. And now is the right time to check your float height. There is a little dot on the float. You measure from the gasket to the dot. And again, use the sheet to check what your float level should be for your model engine. At this point, I reinstalled the choke linkage.
That's what it should look like.
And this is a little tricky. You gotta hook that rear linkage up first, and then align the accelerator pump. And then I put just a couple screws in to hold it temporarily while I got the other linkage in place for the accelerator pump. I'm just double checking to make sure that both linkages seem to be operating correctly, and then install that accelerator pump linkage. This was a little tricky for me to figure out at first. Then you can pop the clip on that linkage to hold it in place. And then you can put the rest of the screws in the... Oh, I guess I assembled the filter first. And then you can assemble the rest of the screws. Now, one of the things that I should note, that I did not figure this out right away, is that one of the screws is longer than the rest. So I'm going to show you where that long screw goes. This location right here is where the singular long screw goes. So pay attention to that when you put it back together. And then you can put the rest of the screws in. And after the halves of the bodies are assembled, you can reassemble your choke, cover, and spring, and make a note of where the adjustment should be on that. And you also need to make your final adjustments on your pump rod and choke plate butterflies, and that's pretty easy to do and measure. And then you're all set and put it back in your boat.